Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So let us continue our basic, mathematical preliminaries discussion of math basics. So yesterday we were looking at this quadratic form, right? A simple quadratic function of a multivariate function, a quadratic function given by x transpose Ax, where A is a symmetric matrix. And why do we need that? Because if you want to define the minimum or a maximum of a multivariate function, right? And if you expand that as uh, as this Taylor series, right? You have okay, just 1 second. Yeah, so if you have something like this, then so at the minimum or a maximum, the gradient should be 0, so g will be 0, right? And the constant term doesn't matter, so f of x naught doesn't matter. And we'll also ignore the higher order terms, just like what we do for a first order for a univariate function. So the shape depends completely on the quadratic term, and which has this form, which transpose capital H, small h. So we want to focus on that and understand, how we can describe the shape of such a function. And we also defined last time that the first derivative is simply the gradient, right, and the second derivative is the Hessian, where you have, I think we had that somewhere. Yeah, so first derivative is just a gradient given by this, and the second derivative is a Hessian given by where the ijth element is given by this. Okay, so now let us look at the derivatives, both first and second, of some simple functions, because we'll be using these results later on in the course. So if I want to have first derivative, that is f prime, okay, that's given by delta f with respect to x, right, which we'll also define as capital G notation. So if you do that, so this is nothing but sigma, let's say bi times xi, right? So derivative of this, that is dou f by dou xi, is equal to bi. Okay, so the gradient vector is the vector b itself, and so b is all vectors are column vectors, right, by convention. So this will be equal to b. Okay, note that the function itself is defined as b transpose x, and when it's a linear function in x, and when you differentiate that, the derivative is b, not b transpose. So we need to remember that. So that's the first derivative, all right? And second derivative, which is just generally say f double prime, which is nothing but the Hessian, right, of f. Okay, and so the ijth element is here. So hij of f is dou square f by dou xi dou xj. Now, since first derivative itself is a constant, second derivative is all zeros. So the Hessian is a square matrix full of zeros. Now let us look at a quadratic expression, which is likely to be more interesting. So if I take first derivative, okay, that is f prime, is g. Now derivative of this is given by well, okay, that's easy to do a kind of matrix derivative. So you can take it as a homework problem. Take a 2 by 2 matrix, right? Let A be a 2 by 2 matrix. Then expand this expression, half of x transpose Ax. So that will be like half of x1, x2 times a11, a12, a21, a22. I think you must have dealt with some of this stuff in your +2 math, but I'm just quickly recapping it. Take this expression and actually differentiate and find out dou f by dou xi. Okay, so and work out the full matrix. So that will be equal to just ax. Okay, so you can prove it as a homework problem. And similarly, if you take this expression, all this, and differentiate and find out the second derivative, that is the h of ij term will be dou square f by dou xi dou xj. Right, in this case, will be very simple expression, which is nothing but aij. Okay, so A itself is the Hessian. That is the thing about this expression.
Yeah,
So
I think someone raised a hand, sir, actually.
just 1 second, I have to.
Sagarika has a doubt, I think.
Okay. Oops, I don't see any.
Okay. Just now she raised the hand. Okay, now
Yes,
it's
Sagarika, you can orally ask.
yeah.
If you have any doubt.
No,
I don't see
sir.
anything, Chandra.
Okay,
Wait,
sir,
wait.
we can continue then.
Okay, yeah, fine. Right. So we have just looked at the first and second derivatives of linear and quadratic expressions in multi dimensions or multivariate functions. Okay, so that you can do it as a homework problem and just verify whatever I've given is correct. Now we want to understand what is the shape of a quadratic form, right? So if you have an expression like f of, oops, change color. If we have an expression like f of x is equal to half of x transpose ax, right? What is its shape? So at x equal to 0, you can see that x equal to 0 means f equal to 0. Okay, so that is clear, obvious. But so around that point, around the origin, what is this function? What does it look like? Does it have a minimum, maximum, or what's going on? And let us look at this more specifically for the case of 2 dimensions, because it's easy to draw some pictures and visualize what's going on. So let's take 2 dimensions. And even in 2 dimensions, if I look at this expression, it will be of this form. Okay, so if I take this and expand it out, it will be of the form, okay, aij times xi xj. So it is not very easy to visualize what this will look like, even in 2 dimensions, because of all this, because there are 4 terms and all the cross terms makes it quite complicated. So what we will do is we'll do a small trick and rotate the coordinates and transform the coordinates x to y in such a way that the y coordinates, the function has a very simple form, right? And the y coordinate space will discuss whether the function has a minimum or a maximum or something else. So now you might have a doubt, that is, I'm trying to find a minimum or a maximum in the x coordinate space. And even if you answer the question in the y coordinate space, how is it even relevant? How can you carry over that result to the x space? Right? Let us see how that is justified. Let's look at that. So this for the transformation, I am looking at an orthogonal transformation. That is, I let x equal to q times y, where q is an orthogonal matrix corresponding to the matrix A. So we said that if A is a symmetric matrix, there is a corresponding orthogonal matrix, right? We have already shown that theorem. And when we're discussing the quadratic forms, that is a function of the type x transpose ax, it has to be a symmetric matrix. Why is that? So for example, this is a scalar, right? Although A is a matrix, x is a vector, x transpose ax is a scalar. So for a scalar, we know that the right transpose is the same. Okay, transpose doesn't change anything. Okay, therefore x transpose x is equal to x transpose is equal to x transpose ax, which means x transpose A transpose x is equal to x transpose ax, which means x transpose A transpose minus A times x is equal to 0. So for any x, this has to be 0, right? So which means A transpose is equal to A. So therefore A is symmetric. So it is meaningful to discuss quadratic forms only when A is symmetric. And even if you look at the multivariate function, since A is a Hessian, now assuming the f is a smooth function, right? The Hessian matrix will be a symmetric matrix. So we are okay. Everything is consistent. So let us take the quadratic, the orthogonal matrix corresponding to A, and define a transformation like this: x equal to qy. Now plug this into the expression. So we have E is equal to half of x transpose Ax. Now plug it into in here. So you get something like this: half of half of y transpose q transpose a q, right, a q y, and q transpose a q that we just derived a theorem in the last class is equal to d, right? So y transpose dy, where d is the square matrix containing, it's a diagonal matrix containing all the eigenvalues, and the off-diagonal terms are all zero. So we've derived this theorem before. Now, so if you plug it in, you get this expression. This expression, if you simplify, it will be nothing but, so I am putting a half here. The nice, right, because half is an advantageous, because when I take a derivative, half gets cancelled off. It looks nice. Okay, so here, so if you have half here, this 2 goes away. So it will be half of yi square lambda I square. What is nice about this expression compared to this is when you go to y, e, or you can call e is a function of y, will be simply equal to lambda I times yi square. Okay, so in 2D, right? So since y is in R2, this is nothing but e of y1 y2 is equal to lambda 1 y1 square plus lambda 2 y2 square. Now this is a very simple function to visualize, right? Because I can draw pictures like this, right? And then I can draw functions like which, right? So this is y1, y2, and so this is very easy to do, and that's why it's convenient to operate in 2 dimensions. But the catch here is we are now considering the function in y coordinates, not in x coordinates. How is it valid? Okay, the answer to that is what we are doing to go from x to y is this orthogonal transformation, and we have already derived and proved that orthogonal transformation is length preserving. That means in this transformation, lengths don't change. It only rotates the the coordinates of y. Since the whole thing is only rotated by a fixed angle, right? The shape of the function doesn't matter. So if I take an object and rotate it, its shape doesn't change. The coordinates of various points on its surface might change, but the shape doesn't change. So similarly, if I take a function which has a minimum like this point, this surface, right, and if I rotate it, it will still be a minimum, right? It doesn't change its nature. So with this justification, simplistic justification, let us now see what the functions will look like. Okay, so I'll take a function like this. I'll call this f of xy, f of y1, y2 is equal to half of lambda 1 y1 square plus lambda 2 y2 square. Now lambda 1 and lambda 2 are eigenvalues, right, of this function. Now let us see how the eigenvalue determine the shape of this expression. So if both lambda 1 and lambda 2 are positive, right, the function will look like this. That is, in y1 dimension, it is going up always. It's always positive. In y2 dimension also, it's positive. So that means it will be like a bowl which is turned upwards, which is what you see here. Okay, so therefore, in this case, you can see that the function only has a minimum, and minimum is at the origin. Because at the origin, the expression itself is 0, and the derivative goes to 0, and that's the only point where derivative goes to 0 in this case. Now, similarly, if you take both eigenvalues negative, minus lambda 1, so minus of something y1 square, minus of something y2 square, then you can easily imagine that the function keeps going down to minus infinity. So in both y1 direction, y2 direction, the function will be going down from 0. So it will have a maximum at the origin. So it's a max type of a function. So this is a min type of function. Right, now let's take more complicated cases. One of the eigenvalues is positive, other is negative. What that means is, let's say lambda 1 is positive, lambda 2 is negative. That means in y1 direction, it will be increasing, in y direction, it will be decreasing. So when you plot that, it looks something like this. So if you look at this direction, which indicates y1, the function is going up. But if you look at this other direction, right, function is going down, and that is y2. So in this direction, it is decreasing, in this direction, it is increasing. So it's quite possible, and such a surface is called a saddle. But it actually looks like a horse's saddle. Now, even more interesting case is this. Lambda 1 is positive and lambda 2 is 0. So that means in one direction, so in this direction, it is going up, right? In the other direction, it is, right, lambda 2 is 0. So it's flat, there's no change. Okay, so that's like this. So it looks like a kind of a canal. So the thing, what is interesting is, even in 2 dimensions, the shape of a function around a point where gradient is 0. So there are all these points, you can see that gradient is 0. That is where del of f is 0 at x equal to 0. So in all these cases, that is true. Now, if you look at the second derivative or the eigenvalues of the second derivative matrix, that is Hessian, if both eigenvalues are positive, it is going up and you have minimum. If both eigenvalues are negative, it is going down and you have a maximum. If some are positive, some are negative, then it is neither maximum nor minimum. Right? So what is interesting is that at a point where gradient is 0, in a multivariate function, you can have neither at maximum or a minimum. It can be something in between, like a saddle. Or it can have even more weird cases where in some dimensions it is flat, and in some dimensions it could be increasing, some dimensions it could be decreasing. That is the most general case. Because in general, since H is a symmetric matrix, all the eigenvalues are real. So some can be positive, some can be negative, some can be 0. That's the most general case. Okay, so just by looking at the eigenvalues of Hessian, or in the case of a quadratic form, the eigenvalues of the matrix A, you can make out very easily what will be the shape of the function. Will it be always positive? Right? If it is a minimum, then it is always positive. If it is maximum, it is always negative. Right? Because minimum or maximum happens at the origin. Okay, and if it is a saddle, it is neither minimum nor maximum. It is, so it can be both positive and negative, and so on, right? So based on this, you can define a certain property of symmetric matrices, right? Which is called definiteness. Okay, so which means for a square matrix A, the quadratic form, right, is greater than 0 for all x, where x is not equal to 0. So x should not be a 0 vector. Okay, so if you take any other non-zero vector, then the matrix, this quadratic form will be always positive, right? When, if and only, all the eigenvalues are positive. So this is your your minimum case. So when all the eigenvalues are positive, right, and right for all I. Okay, so then this corresponds to kind of a minimum, and the function is always positive. Such a matrix is called a positive definite matrix. So because if you plot the corresponding quadratic form, it looks like this. So similarly, if all the eigenvalues are either greater than or equal to 0, right? So it means some eigenvalues can be 0, which means in some directions it will be going up, and in some directions it will remain flat. Okay, so lambda is greater than 0, looks like this. Lambda equal to 0 looks like this. Now, so that means in the corresponding quadratic form would be greater than or equal to 0, right? Sorry. Okay, so even when x is non-zero, this is what we'll consider all the time. Right? For some x's, it can be 0 because some eigenvalues are zeros. Okay, so in this case, the function is called positive semi-definite because the function will be greater than or equal to 0. So similarly, if the eigenvalues are all negative, so we have seen that if they're all negative, the function will be going down below 0. So that means it will always be negative. So that is, this function is less than 0 for all x not equal to 0. And such a matrix is called negative definite matrix. Now similarly, a more relaxed case version of the same thing. If the eigenvalues are not strictly negative, but can be non-positive. Right. So in this case, the function itself will be non-positive, right, can be 0 or negative for all x not equal to 0, and such a matrix is called negative semi-definite. Okay, so now the most general case where lambda I can be greater than or equal to or less than 0. Okay, so then the corresponding quadratic form x transpose x also can be greater than or equal to or less than 0 for all x, right, not equal to 0, this 0 vector. Right, in this case the matrix is said to be indefinite. So this property of definiteness of a square matrix comes from its eigenvalue structure. What kind of eigenvalues does it have? That is what it. So, and in case of a multivariate function, we are trying to understand its minimum, maximum, and all that. Right? The definiteness is applied to the Hessian of that function at the point of interest, assuming that the gradient itself is 0. Okay, so with this now you can do some optimization. If you just take a pure quadratic form, optimization is very simple because whether it has a minimum or a maximum, everything is happening at 0. Okay, so it's a kind of trivial case. But if you take a more general function where there's a quadratic form and a linear term and a constant term and all that, then it gets slightly more interesting. Of course, constant term doesn't matter when it comes to but when it comes to location of the minimum or maximum, but it makes it complete. So let us take this expression f of x equal to half of x transpose x plus b transpose x plus c. Now we want to find the minimum of it. So so it's a derivative, right? Del of f is equal to, we have seen the derivative of this, which is just ax, and derivative of b transpose, sorry, this should not be, it's just b. Okay, so by solving this, right, you get the minimum or a maximum. So to find out whether it's minimum or a maximum after solving this and getting the correct x, you have to calculate the Hessian at that point, right, and then find out its eigenvalue. But that's a long story. Let us just solve the stationary point where the gradient is 0. Now, so this is somewhat straightforward because this implies just right x plus b equal to 0, and so x equal to minus b and x equal to a in minus of a inverse. So somewhat simple, assuming assuming a is invertible, I mean, life is simple, but things can get more complicated. We'll see that later. So now let us take the case where I have a cost function which needs to be optimized, and I also have a constraint, right, like g of x equal to c, which is like additional constraint. So I need to optimize f of x, which is this function, right, for some constraint. So how do we do that? So for that we adopt something called a method of Lagrangian multipliers. Right. So where if the original function which we need to optimize is f of x, then we define a new an expanded cost function. We'll call it e of x, and there's an additional parameter called lambda which comes in. So f of x plus this lambda times, right, and the constant that I'm giving is gx equal to c. So that constant is now written in the form of something is equal to 0. So I write it as gx minus c, right, and this becomes additional component to this function. So once I have this, augmented cost function, the solution is nothing but del of e with respect to x equal to 0 and del of e with respect to lambda, right? This is called the Lagrangian multiplier. So these are called Lagrangian multipliers, lambdas. So you differentiate e not only with respect to x, but this augmented function, not the original function, right? And also differentiate with respect to lambda and solve them both together. Okay, so then you get the solution, which is the optimum under the constraint gx equal to c. Because actually, what happens is when you just differentiate this with respect to lambda, right? So differentiate dou e by dou lambda equal to 0. That simply gives you this. Because this simply gives you this. Okay, so the second equation is nothing but the constant itself. The first equation is both more interesting, where you have the derivative of f of x and also the derivative coming because of g of x. So what is the meaning of this? So if you differentiate the first equation, del of e with respect to x, that gives you del of f plus lambda and del of g, everything with respect to x, that's equal to 0. Okay, so this is the first equation. So why is it justified and how is it coming? So let us look at that. Imagine the function we are trying to optimize, which is f of x, is something like this. Like what we showed. This is a surface of f of x. This gray mountain-like thing. Now the constraint is g. So this is the picture is showing it in 2 dimensions. So the constraint is g of x comma y equal to c, okay, which goes like this. So now if I look at the top view of this function, look at from top, then I'll draw these dotted curves that you see, the closed loops that you see, correspond to different values of f of x comma y. So when you have a hill like this, I can cut this hill. So if I have a hill, all right, I can cut it at various levels. Sorry, resume this perfectly horizontal. All right, and then I get these sections. So assuming these planes are horizontal, I get these sections, and for each of the section, the value of the function is the same, is a given value, right? And such curves are called level curves. So here in this, on the right side, you can see the level curves of this surface. So here, if I cut it at one level, the value of f of x is xy is d1. Another level it is d2, and another level is d3, and so on. You can, if you want, you can have more levels, right? Something like this. I'll even call this d0, and so on and so forth. Okay. So as you can see in this example, as you go towards in this direction towards the center, right, the value of f of x comma y goes up. As you go away from the center, this point, right, the value goes down. So this is increasing values. So I want to find a point, right, in this plane x comma y, such that the point should lie on this red line, because that's a constraint, absolute constraint, and should be as much as possible close to the peak, right? Because as I go towards this, the value of f increases. Now, so since if I'm anywhere on this dotted curves, my value of f is constant, right? Because that's how we have chosen those curves. So if I, on this curve where f is equal to d3, right, then I get two solutions where intersects g at this point and this point. That's how it's nice. I have two solutions, but point is d3 is pretty low, right? Because I can do better. So I go to d2, which is here, this curve. Okay, d2 curve also intersects the red curve at 2 points. So I have two solutions, but d2 is still somewhat low. I mean, I can do better. So you keep on trying to you try to go closer and closer towards a p. If I come to d1, like this curve, right here, this curve and the red curve intersect at one point, just barely make a contact. So at this point, my d1 is fairly high, and I also have a solution because I'm sitting also on this red curve. Okay, now I get even more greedy. I want to do even better. So I go even closer to the peak and take a curve like this, d0. Right, d0 is even higher than d1, so which is great. But point is, if I'm on this curve, I will never cut or never make a contact with the red curve. So I'll be failing to satisfy the constraint. So the best place where I can satisfy the constraint and also I get maximum value is the point where this dotted curve just barely makes a contact with the red curve. What does it mean to barely make a contact? That means at this point, the norm vector of the dotted curve and the norm vector of the red curve both are parallel. That's what it means for the two curves to make a contact. That the tangents are the same. When the tangents are the same, which means that their normals are in the same opposite direction but parallel. Okay, so that is exactly what this equation means, because del of f is nothing but the normal, right, to the level curves. You can easily show that. Oh, sorry, so this should be g, and del of g is nothing but the tangent to the g function. So this equation says that both are parallel. Okay, both there's the opposite sign, but they're parallel. So that's the intuitive idea behind the method of Lagrange multipliers, and you can use it to solve some interesting problems. Let's take a toy problem here. So I have f of x is equal to minus x1 minus 1 whole square minus x2 minus 1 whole square. So you can obviously see that without any constraint, the solution is simply 1 and 1. Okay, and so there's a max. It has a maximum at that point at 1, 1. But now I have a constraint x1 plus x2 equal to 1. So what do we do? So I have to take the augmented function e of x is equal to f of x plus lambda into x1 plus x2 minus 1. Okay, so the equations are del E with respect to x is equal to 0 and del E with respect to lambda is equal to 0. Okay, so del E with respect x equal to 0 actually has two equations, because that means dou E by dou x1 is equal to 0 and dou E by dou x2 is equal to 0. Okay, and so if you do this, if you differentiate this with respect to x1, you get this, and second equation will be this. Right now, del of E with respect to lambda equal to 0, that means nothing but, so as we have said before, the derivative with respect to lambda simply gives you the constant itself. So that gives you x1 plus x2 is equal to 1. So solve this, this, and this is three equations, right? And you can get x1 is equal to half and x2 is equal to half. Okay, so you can solve such constraint optimization functions, optimization problems using the method of Lagrange multipliers. And you can use this method also to some other interesting problem. It's the same problem which you have seen before, but the problem of finding the eigenvalues or eigenvectors, right? You can pose it as a constraint optimization problem, which gives you a new geometric interpretation. So normally to find eigenvalues, eigenvectors, you just say Ax equal to lambda x and you say we solve it. Okay, but what is the meaning of this equation and how did you get this equation? So one way to look at it is, look at this Lagrangian function e prime is equal to half of x transpose ax. So take the quadratic form corresponding to A and then add the constraint mod x is equal to 1. So basically I'm trying to optimize the quadratic form under the constraint mod x equal to 1. Okay, so don't ask what that means, but if you do that, right, you get del of E equal to 0 with respect to x. Okay, so that gives you x minus lambda x is equal to 0. All right, so in any way mod x is given to be 1. So in fact, you can take it as for this thing minus 1. Okay, because so mod x equal to 1, if that is a constraint, mod x square is also equal to 1. So which means x transpose x is equal to 1. So therefore I can take it as x transpose x minus 1 is equal to 0. So this is my gx minus c form. Okay, so that if I plug it in here, I get this. So the solution for this is x equal to lambda x, which is my eigenvalue equation. So you can think of the eigenvectors as the maxima of this function, right? The quadratic form of A under the constraint mod x is equal to 1, which is just an interesting way of looking at the eigenvalues of a matrix in terms of the corresponding quadratic form. So with this background now, we are in a position to look at the solution of linear equations x equal to b. Here we have different situations. So A is a matrix. In general, we'll take it as a rectangular matrix, right? That is, it's in R to the n times m. It's an n by m matrix. and B is an n-dimensional matrix, X is an m-dimensional matrix. Let's take the simple case. First one is n equal to m, and which means A is a square matrix. So you have Ax equal to B, and so therefore X is equal to A inverse B, assuming A inverse exists. Okay, so then X equal to A inverse B. So this is a simple solution. But sometimes it's not like that. Let's take a situation where n is greater than m, right? That is, you have a lot of unknowns, and you have fewer unknowns and more equations, more constraints. So then what do? So this example of this kind of situation is like trying to fit a straight line through too many points. Okay, how do you fit a straight line through set of 5 points? Right, if I have only 2 points, then you have 2 equations. Unknowns are m and c, the 2 unknowns. Okay, now if I have only 2 points, right, then I have 2 unknowns and 2 equations. So I can have a unique solution. But if I have 2 unknowns, m and c, but if I have 5 equations, that is case 2. That m is the number of equations, n is the number of unknowns. So then what do? Because in this case, what you do is, as you know, you do some kind of a method of use a regression method of minimizing least squares. So what you do is you take this error, right, from the sum line, right, and each data point like this, and take the square of all the errors and minimize that. Okay, so instead of solving X equal to B, consider the error X minus B and try to minimize that squared error. Okay, so that way I'll try to find the values m and n, the 2 unknowns, which will minimize this kind of a cost function, norm of X minus B whole square. So that's what we are doing here. So this is X minus, so X minus B transpose times X minus B is nothing but, right, X minus B norm square, right, both are same. So if we minimize this, so minimizing this, we'll have to use all those formula that we derived before. Because if you actually expand this out, you get E is equal to B transpose B minus X transpose A transpose B minus B transpose AX plus X transpose A transpose AX. Okay, so you'll have 4 terms like this, and you can show that easily that these 2 are the same. Right, so you just make 2 times one of them. This is a constant term. So this will be of the form this will be of the form B transpose X, which we seen before, and this is of the form some kind of X transpose, I don't know, some matrix K times X. Right, so derivative of this is straightforward. The derivative of this is simply B. Derivative of this is we have a half here, right? It is just kx. So if you solve that and make it equal to solve the derivative and make it equal to 0, right? You get this expression. You can easily derive this. So it will be, instead of just A inverse B, which was so simple in the previous case, you get A transpose A, inverse of the whole thing, times A transpose times B. So instead of A inverse, we got this huge complicated expression. And this expression is denoted by the symbol A dagger, actually, or sometimes A plus. So this is called a pseudo inverse because it acts like an inverse. In this case, when m is greater than n. Then there is a third case where m is so here m is less than n here, and here it is m is greater than n. That means number of unknowns is greater than the number of equations. So a simple example of that is just this. So I have a straight line, I have one equation, and I have to solve. Okay, so one equation is x plus by is equal to c, right? And I have to find a solution. But the point is, any point on the line is a solution. Okay, so I have one equation, two unknowns. So what do you do? So instead of avoiding this problem of infinite solutions, we put an additional constraint and make sure we get a unique solution. So what is that constraint in this case? The constraint is, okay, give me the smallest solution, that is solution which has the smallest length in all those cases. So that will be this point, because that is the foot of the perpendicular from the origin, because of all the solutions, that solution has the smallest length. Okay, so how do you do that? So in this case, the cost is given by x square plus y square. E is actually y square because we are looking at minimizing the length. And the constraint, which is the equation which we need to satisfy, that is x plus by equal to c. So under these conditions, if you apply the method of Lagrange multipliers, your E prime is equal to x square plus y square plus lambda into the constraint. Now, if we differentiate this with respect to x, y, and lambda, right? So you get these two equations, and also you get x plus by plus, x by is equal to c. So if you solve these three, right, you can show that x equal to this ac by a square plus b square, and y is equal to bc by a square plus b square. And you can recall your high school coordinate geometry. You can show that that is the foot of the perpendicular from the origin to the straight line. So the same thing in multi-dimensions, in more general case, will look like this. E is x transpose x, okay, which is just the norm square of x. We're trying to minimize that. Under the constraint, so the constraint here is x minus b is equal to 0. Now, ax minus b equal to 0 has many equations, right? It has n equations, okay? Because n stands for number of equations. So therefore, the corresponding for each constraint, you need to have one Lagrange multiplier. So you need to have one lambda for that. So this notation is actually uppercase lambda, right? This notation is basically, it means lambda 1, lambda 2, etc., lambda n. Okay, so when you do a dot product of that with respect to this, it basically is something like lambda 1 times the first equation minus lambda 2 times second equation, and so on. So that is your E prime. Now, just like before, you differentiate this with respect to x and this lambda vector. So you do E prime with respect to x is 0 and del E prime with respect to this lambda vector, right, is 0. So if you solve for the two, just some simple algebra, right, you can show that x is equal to, right, this whole thing times b. So when you have too many solutions, when you have infinite solutions, you apply an additional constraint that you have to minimize, because you can always satisfy the solution, okay, in many ways. So therefore, in this case, what you do is you added an additional cost function, which is minimizing the norm, right? And then this becomes the constraint, right? In the second case, you won't have any solution in general. So you just try to minimize the squared error, right, between the fit and the data. So you can see that in solving these different systems of linear equations, we have used some of the ideas we have discussed before. That is, what's a quadratic form, how to differentiate, how to find minimum, and so on and so forth. Okay, so let us stop there. A couple of simple points in probability theory, but I'll discuss it when we come to that topic. So later on, we'll discuss a way of clustering by fitting PDFs, that is probability density functions, to data sets. So when we come to that, we'll discuss some of the basics of probability. Let us stop here. Okay, so any questions on what we discussed? Chat box. Okay, there are no questions, then let's stop here. And next class, we'll start discussing what is data and how do you visualize data. Because so now that we have picked up a few mathematical tools to analyze and which we'll be using throughout the course in various topics. So first thing we'll do is what is data and how do you visualize data. We'll do that next Monday. Okay, have a nice weekend, and if you have no questions, I'll